What is up guys, Alex from Lakey Wargames here and welcome to today's video. Today I'm going to be taking you through my brand new 2000 point Ossiarch Bonereapers competitive army list for the 2023/24 General's Handbook of the Andorian Locusts. Alrighty guys, so welcome to today's video. I know, it's another Ossiarch Bonereapers video, and it's another Ossiarch Bonereapers army list video. That's because the one that I originally came out with about a month ago was great for the last General's Handbook, and also was a bit of fun, and then I updated it about 3 weeks after that, because I found a more improved version of the list through a little bit of playtesting, a bit of theory crafting, so we had an improved version of the list, and that's what I was going to stick with into the new General's Handbook. Now we've got the Andorian Locusts, and it's all about wizards, which is perfectly fine, but we also had brand new FAQs and points changes for the Ossiarch Bonereapers. I did a separate video covering both of those specifically for OBR, so if you're interested in my thoughts and theories about the changes that were made, I'll link the video in the description below. And if you've seen my latest video before this one, where I was talking about Gothzar Harvesters and how with their new points changes, where they've dropped from 210 to 180, that I think they actually have a lot of play potential. Now, it wasn't just that factored in my decision of changing my list yet again. In that FAQ and with those points changes, it completely tore apart my old list. If you saw the video, it was basically a Arcan and Mere Kanan combo of being able to cast Dire Ultimatum from 9 inches away and shut down a unit. It had 2 Mortek Crawlers that were making a unit fight last, and we also had Soul Snare Shackles, which have also been changed going into this new General's Handbook, that used to be able to deny charges if you started within 6 inches of them. So it was basically like a deny the enemy, being able to fight me on their own terms, do their own thing, and just be able to pull them apart and kill them off sort of one by one and win the game through that. But Mere Kanan got nerfed, our Dire Ultimatum got changed, the Shackles got completely reworded, so they now do something completely different. So it kind of just ruined the main fitting of the list. The Crawlers didn't come down in points, so they're still very expensive, and now that they're basically my only way to shut someone down, they're just not enough on their own. So that list kind of fell by the wayside. So going into the new General's Handbook, I've read over the rules, and I thought maybe we'll go into a different direction this time. And we've completely 180'd on the list, and we're doing something new. So yeah, but this one is built to last. Obviously from the start of the handbook there might be a few tweaks and changes throughout, but this one is built to last for the handbook. So hopefully this might be a OBR army list video that will actually stand the test of time. I hope this time, and it's something that can hopefully inspire you guys in making your own lists. So enough rambling from me, and let's jump on in. We're going to read through the army list first. If you've seen this type of list format before, what we like to do is we're going to read through the entire army list. It's up on the screen if you wish to read through it. And I'm going to then come back through the list and sort of talk through my choices on why I've chosen what I've chosen and some of the combinations and playable things in this list. So let's start off at the top. We are faction Ossiarch Bonereapers. Our sub-faction is Null Myriad, and our grand strategy is from the new GHB. It's the Spell Casting Savant. We have 3 heroes in this list. They are Catacross the Mortarch of the Necropolis. We have a Mortison Bone Shaper, who is our general. His command trait is the Aura of Sterility, and he has the spell Empower Nanorite Weapons. We also have a Mortison Ossifactor. He has the artifact of the Gothzar Cartouche, and his spell is Drain Vitality. There are 3 battle line in this list, and that's 6 Immortus Guard, who are made battle line through having Immortus in general. We have 2 units of 5 Cavalos Death Riders, and we have 2 units of Gothzar Harvesters in this list. Rounding us out, we have 2 Endless Spells in the case of the Bone Tithe Shrieker, and we have the Soul Stealer Carrion as well. This entire list is wrapped up in the Ossiarch Cohort, which is the battalion from the Ossiarch Bonereapers Battle Tome, and that makes this entire army a 1-drop deployment. It's coming in at 1,980 points. We have 0 allies in here, and we've only used 1 of our reinforcement points, and altogether this list has 110 wounds. So let's look at the list from the top down, from straight on, from an outside perspective. First thing you'll notice is this is a very small list, and it is one of the downsides and the weaknesses to this list is as we go through some of the combos and the pairings in this list, it's very powerful. It loves to fight, obviously up close. There's no sort of range support in this list. As OBR players, we are generally used to that anyway, but it's a very low model count army. It's only 21 models. Thankfully, as I said, those 21 models are very punchy, very fighty. They can hold their own in combat, no problem, and as we can tell, is 110 wounds within those 21 models, so everything is fairly tanky and hopefully going to be sticking around for us. The downside to this though is that means we are going to struggle to be taking objectives off of people, and that's where the Soul Stealer Carrion spell comes in, which is the one that makes enemies with a wound characteristic of 1 or 2 while they're within 6 inches of that endless spell no longer be able to contest objectives. This list is made to sort of fight on 2 fronts at most. The Immortus Guard, the Ossifactor, the Catacross the Bone Shaper, with the Harvesters is sort of going to be taking the primary objective, and the Death Riders are going to be sort of flying around and just sort of trying to take objectives that aren't really contested over, and sort of taking things in the backfield. Thankfully in AOS you can tag an objective and it's yours until someone comes to take it. So against sort of armies that have got lots of units that are able to sort of teleport around or come in off the backfield, taking objectives is going to be very difficult, and it's the very big downside to this army, as well as obviously being shot and sort of magicked, which is OBR's main thing. Which takes us into the next point, the sub-faction, Null Myriad. Now this is probably every OBR's player's favourite sub-faction come this season, because if you are wholly within 9 inches of a Mortisan hero, or Arcan the Black, then you can ignore the spells from your enemies, or the effects of their endless spells on a 2+. Because this list is so small and everything is going to be sort of centered around the Bone Shaper and the Ossifactor, that means we're hopefully going to be diverting some of that magical damage as it comes in out of the way. In the new General's Handbook, there is the big scary spell that has the casting value of 12, but does deal 4d6 mortal wounds, which is something that we don't want to get hit by. The new Geminids is able to shut off your ability to take command abilities, which with an Ossiarch army is very important to us. So those are 2 things that I really don't want to get hit by, as well as other matchups, things like Tzeentch, Lumineth, the new Seraphon can do a lot of damage with mortal wound magic, so being able to hopefully ignore that all on a 2+ will be great. The thing that's going to kind of suck is obviously when the Death Riders go off on their own, they're not going to be within that 9-inch bubble, so they're going to be susceptible, and Catacross is obviously Mortis Praetorian keyworded, so he isn't able to take the effects of Null Myriad, but thankfully he's a 20 wound Chad and will just hopefully take the wounds like a man and then heal them back up, so fingers crossed. That also takes us to our command trait of choice, and that is the Aura of Sterility. He is on our Mortisan Bone Shaper, who is our general, and the Aura of Sterility basically gives a little bubble of everyone wholly within 12 inches is -1 to be hit and -1 to be wounded by shooting attacks. Because the Bone Shaper, Ossifactor, Immortus Guard, and the Harvesters with Catacross are basically all going to be hugging each other, that hopefully means that they're all going to be in that bubble of 2+2 ignore spells, and they're also all -1 to be hit and wounded by shooting attacks, and again, hopefully nullifying some of that damage and weaknesses to this army, which is being hit at range. Now, I wasn't too confident on a grand strategy. A lot of the ones in the new General's Handbook are quite difficult to score. I went with the Spellcasting Savant to start with, see how we go. I was a bit iffy about taking this one. It's the one where you basically have to pick someone who's capable of being an Andorian Locust, and they have to be alive at the end of the turn, and it goes on to your general. So basically our Bone Shaper has to be alive come the end of the game. Bone Shaper is something that a lot of people want to target anyway. The Ossifactor in this list has the Gothizzar Cartouche, which gives a +1 wound aura to everyone wholly within 9 inches for their melee weapons. So I'm hoping, it was a tough choice who to make the general, but I split them up because the Ossifactor is obviously key to me. Being able to get +1 wound in this list is very nice. But if I also made him the general, he would then also have the command trait and would be the cause of my grand strategy, so it puts sort of double targets on his head. So I went with the Bone Shaper to be able to split the artifact and command trait, so if one of them dies, then I still am able to use the effects of the other, and yeah, so it does sort of put a double target on my Bone Shaver, because obviously he's giving out the aura to nullify some shooting, he's able to heal things, and he's now also the cause of my grand strategy, so that is something to be aware of. But I wasn't too confident on anything out of the Ossiarch Tome. We've got the scales balanced, where I have to end the game with a full unit of Death Riders with no casualty, so I have to heal them back up to full. Because they're going to be going off doing their own thing, probably outside of the Null Myriad bubble, I think they're going to get focused down and isolated, so yeah, I didn't really want to choose that one. The other one that I usually like is the Creation and Termination, and that is where you have to have more Mortisan heroes alive on the battlefield than there are enemy heroes at the end of the game. In this kind of list, where it's such a combat heavy army, and it's not in Mortis Praetorians, so it's hard to be able to sort of countercharge and get around things, I wasn't very confident in my ability to be able to reach out and kill enemy backline heroes with ease. So yeah, I didn't want to go for that one. I prefer that in like an Arcan list, if I'm bringing like the Nightmare Predator, and obviously I've got access to Curse of Years, things like that, as well as being able to hopefully get some Death Riders into the backlines. Then I get my chances a bit higher, but where I've only got 2 Mortisans, it means that I have to make sure the enemy's only got 1 hero or less left at the end of the game, and also have to keep my 2 alive, which is going to be a hard enough task as it is. So that's why I didn't go for either of those, and I'm not a big fan of any of the others in the General's Handbook this season. So also for our heroes, we have obviously Big Catacross himself. Catacross in this list is basically just to do what Catacross excels at. His main thing is going to be putting out his War Scroll command of Supreme Lord of the Bone Reaper Legions, giving everyone wholly within 24 inches of him +1 to hit and +1 to save. This combined with the Ossifactor, who's carrying that lovely Gothzar cartouche that we spoke about earlier, while they're wholly within 9 of the Ossifactor, they're going to be +1 to wound. Also, if Catacross uses his wholly within 24, they're now +1 to hit. I put a video out just before this one talking about the Harvester, but you're now putting your Harvesters to hitting on 2s, wounding on 2s. Similarly, you're doing the same with the Immortis Guard, who are now hitting on 2s, wounding on 2s as well. That is the main sort of focal point of this list, is basically being able to be on 2s and 2s with a decent amount of rend and throwing your attacks, sort of Hail Marying people and just taking them out in one go. Now, there are other things that you can do, such as the command for Bludgeon to give yourself plus rend. We have access to Drain Vitality in this list from the Ossifactor. It's a fairly easy spell to cast, which is the one that makes an enemy unit -1 to hit and -1 to their save. So we can basically give any of our units +2 rend, as well as making the enemy -1 to hit. So there's very nice combinations of we're just able to put our rend through the roof. We've got 2s and 2s to hit and wound on our big punchy units, and thanks to Catacross as well, with that +1 save, they're going to be a lot more tankier, sitting on those 2+ save for the Immortis Guard and a 3+ save for our Harvesters. As well as getting that -1 to hit from hopefully Drain Vitality, which in the new General's Handbook as well, obviously we have all the lovely primal dice, so hopefully pushing out spells with the Ossifactor and the Bone Shaper is going to be something that's slightly easier. Catacross has the Scroll Bearer, so he can also make another enemy unit -1 to hit, so if we think we're going to get into a sort of a bit of a scary combat, then we can really debuff the enemy. Obviously we're already buffing our own save, we're getting +1 to hit, +1 to wound, which is guaranteed for the +1 hit, +1 wound. All we need to do is spend that CP from Catacross, the Ossifactor is giving out at all times, and obviously another CP for Bludgeon, so we can guarantee that combo going off. Obviously Drain Vitality can be dispelled. If we come into a really strong enemy dispelling army, then that's no guarantee, but we can still basically get +1 hit, +1 save, +1 wound, and +1 rend if we really wanted to, off for guarantee of 2 CP. Now obviously we can mix and match that each way as we need them. We can really put a Harvester through the roof. If you use the Ossifactor's ability on his War Scroll for his Refined Creations, you can give out another -1 rend to one of the Harvesters, and if you combine that with everything all together, you can basically make your Harvesters up to rend 5 in essence, with Drain Vitality making them -1 to save rolls, and you putting the +2 rend on yourself, being 2 rend to start off with your bludgeons or sickles. That basically is what gets you to rend 5. So when you're fighting something like a Stormcast, you can just really, or Slaves of Darkness, where they've got really high armor saves and hopefully not too much going on in the ward save department, you can really cut down those troops like they are nothing. So that'll be the main stick of this list, hopefully using Null Myriad or Sterility to be able to divert some of that ranged firepower and attention away. We've got Catacross and the Ossifactor basically making our Immortus Guard and 2 Harvesters go absolutely nuts, and hopefully killing everything and anything that they touch. Obviously with the 2 Harvesters we've got access to those monstrous actions, so we can roar or we can stomp for some more mortal wounds as we need them, but using that roar to hopefully shut off some command abilities. And we also have the Bonetie Shrieker in here, which can shut off Inspiring Presence. So if we go into a bigger horde unit, something with a low armor save, obviously with our ability to use the Rend, we are hopefully going to cut straight through them, cause a lot of casualties. Hopefully there's one way or another. Obviously spells are a bit dependent on whether we can get them off or not. We do have the lovely primal dice, so boosting our cast with our smaller heroes. Obviously everyone else can use them to dispel, or if they've got something like a Techless, they're already really good at dispelling anyway. So we have the Harvesters in there to be able to roar instead, hopefully still shut that off and cause lots of battle shock damage. Again, because we're such a small army here, the Immortus Guard are a 30 wound brick with Catacross's +1 to save. They have a 2+ armor save. They've got their 6+ Deathless save. The Harvesters themselves are 3+ saves with, you know, their 6+ Deathless saves. We can use our commands to be able to buff that to a 5+, or we can use like all-out defense if we're getting hit by a lot of Rend. So it's really, really tanky with the 30 wounds from the Immortus Guard. Obviously the Harvesters have only got 10 each, but if they do go down, thanks to their new points, they are only 180 points each. It will sting as they go down because this is such a low model count army, but between the Bone Shaper and Catacross being able to put sort of 3 wounds back to them each turn, then hopefully they won't go down too fast. The Bone Shapers also bring in his War Scroll spell, where you get to roll a dice for each enemy model in a unit, and you can cause mortal wounds on a 5+ to them. So hopefully his little bit of anti-horde tech plus our ways to shut off the enemy using Inspiring Presence means that we can deal with hordes through battle shock and a mixture of his spell. Now this was all wrapped up in the Ossiarch cohort, and my main thinking with this list is being able to be a 1-drop. I'm hoping to be able to go second in most of the rounds, and that will allow one of my spellcasters, either the Bone Shaper or the Ossifactor, thanks to the new General's Handbook being the Andorian Locusts, they'll get to cast an extra spell in this turn. So hopefully that's going to go on the Ossifactor, so he's able to put out sort of Drain Vitality on someone, or also be able to use his War Scroll spell to give both the Harvesters -1 Rend once things start kicking off. If not, we obviously have the Bone Shaper who can use Empowerite Nanorite weapons, so not only are we going to have crazy amount of Rend, but we can make our exploding 6s become exploding 5s. This is very nice on the Immortus Guard on the turn. If you get them in, they are just going crazy. They use their command to be able to fight twice. They've got Empower and Nanorite weapons on them, as well as having +1 hit, +1 wound. It can be very, very tasty indeed. They can throw out a lot of damage for that turn that they fight twice. But this will also give us some flexibility into being able to use things like Mystic Shield, sort of as and when we need them, just in case that we are on the receiving end of a lot of damage. Obviously we've got Catacross's +1 save, and we can use the all-out defense command, but it's all very situational because I know it's a lot of combat phase commands between bludgeon, all-out attack, all-out defense, those kind of things. So being able to get that Mystic Shield off sometimes is really helpful, because then you can basically give yourself that +2 stacked save, and then also be able to use your ability to fight twice, or bludgeon if you need it. So yeah, being in the Ossiarch cohort keeps us that 1-drop, because obviously we have 2 Harvesters. I would love to go Battle Regiment, because the Ossiarch cohort means when you deploy, all of your units have to be within 6 inches of 2 or more friendly Ossiarch Bonereaper models during deployment. Battle Regiment obviously frees up you to be able to deploy anywhere in your zone, not be so tethered close together. But at the same time, it's not the worst thing in the world for this list, because we are Null Myriad and we also have that aura of sterility. We want to be quite tucked in, because the 2 Mortisans are going to be hiding in and amongst the Immortus Guard, to be protected obviously from the bodyguard rule, but also to be in the centre of the army to give out those bubbles, so both the Harvesters, the Immortus, and during deployment hopefully, because we're going second, anyone with big range projection, they will be protected in the Null Myriad and Aura bubbles, and then when it's our turn to push out, we can sort of react to them there. In the General's Handbook, there's a lot of things for going second. There's a lot of bonuses to the missions, being able to pick things that happen with objectives and so on, as well as also getting the sort of extra cast through your Locust. So being able to choose whether you're going first or second will really open up a lot of doors. Obviously, being in the cohort, like I said, that lets us take 2 harvesters and still be a 1-drop. Battle Regiment, you can only have the 1 monster. So this sort of lets this list do its own thing and still compete with all the Battle Regiment lists that I think we're going to see. In the new General's Handbook, there wasn't too much, in my opinion, from the 2 new battalions that are going to rival a 1-drop very much. So yeah, I think being able to compete with the 1-drop armies is going to be very good in being able to help dictate the pace of the game and decide whether we need buffs up and to go first, or whether we want to go second, let the enemy sort of come forward a bit and be able to react to them. In terms of battle tactics for this new General's Handbook, there's quite a few that we are able to pull off fairly comfortably. The first one being Intimidate the Invaders, where you pass the battle tactic if there are more friendly units wholly outside your territory than there are friendly units within your territory. Because this is quite a sort of Death Star-esque list, you've got a lot of units together. As you move forward in the sort of opening first and second turn, or into that mid-game, you're going to end up with basically more of your units outside of your territory than hopefully within it, unless obviously you get alpha striked and boxed in. But again, this list really wants to be in combat. So come mid-game, late game, hopefully you've punched your way through the Alpha Strike, managed to shrug it off, push forward, and you should be able to score Intimidate the Invaders with this list fairly easily. There is the Magical Dominance, which is basically cast a spell from a friendly wizard unit. You have to cast 1 or more spell and have none of them unbound in that turn. Obviously you can try and do something like just cast Mystic Shield in your first turn, and then because you're not really going to need too much else up, then you could just cast that 1 spell, sort of bait your opponent into thinking that obviously you're going to try and do all the other spells, and with your extra cast from going second or anything like that, they might just sort of let something go, or you know, if they fail to unbind it, then you can try and shoot for that. That's something that we can do. And Bait and Trap is quite a nice one, where you have to have 2 more units in combat that have retreated, and then 2 other friendly ones making a charge. That can be set up quite easily by both the Death Riders taking up flanks, going in on sort of those early turns. Hopefully you're going second. If you manage to get a double or anything like that, then you can retreat them both out, and then hopefully like your Harvesters or your Mortis Guard or something are going to go in. So those are the 3 that I think are quite easy to be able to score from the General's Handbook. Obviously situational dependent means when you're going to pick those battle tactics. But as well as that, obviously we have in our own book, we have the Trample the Defiant for the Death Riders, where they have to charge something and then still be in combat with it at the end of the turn. That one's very nice, very easy, very popular at the moment for Ossiarch players. We have the Sculptor's Entourage, where we have to have the Immortus Guard and a Mortisan Hero contesting an objective, which is very easy because we've got 2 Mortisans. They're hiding in amongst the Death Guard. They want to go forward onto an objective, so scoring that's going to be a piece of cake in this list, hopefully. And we also have the Tithe Demands, which is where you have to pick an enemy hero or monster on the battlefield, and you complete it if it is destroyed by a friendly Gothsar Harvester. Obviously with 2 Harvesters stomping around on 2s and 2s to hit and wound, hopefully you can buff their end up to sort of 4 or 5. They are able to kill things very easily if you can catch out an enemy hero or a wounded monster. Obviously you have to think 1 step ahead as always with your battle tactics, but now with the 2 Harvesters in the list in a forward fighting fronting ability and role for the army, then hopefully that is something you're going to be able to pull off with a fair amount of ease. But yeah, that's about it for this army list. It's quite a straightforward one, obviously being such a low model count. It's quite an easy one to pilot, but at the same time it's also one that requires you really have to think where you're going, where you want to go and when, because every time you lose a unit, if you misposition something, then you're going to really feel it if something gets killed. But it's a very resilient list with a lot of punch to it through that Gothazar Cartouche, getting the +1 to hit from Catacross and the +1 to save, being able to use something like a Bludgeon. The nice thing about all of that is it doesn't rely too much on the spell casting, so when you come into a magic heavy army like Seraphon or someone like a Teclis or a Tzeentch, you're not relying on your spells so much this time. Obviously Empower Nadirite Weapons, Drain Vitality, Mystic Shield are all fantastic spells. We've got 100 points worth of Endless Spells in this list, which can be very good. Obviously the Carrion is probably the most important spell of the 2 Endless Spells to this list, because we have access to Roar from the harvesters, we have another way to make the enemy not being able to inspiring presence. So the carrion is going to be the main one because we've got so few bodies to be able to hopefully take those objectives, or even if you can sort of send a blob into the middle objective, hopefully kill everyone that's sort of trying to fight you on that objective, and you just use it to be able to get 5 Death Riders to take something on the flank. Then the carrion is very important for that. But the nice thing is all the fighting buffs and the main sort of punch to this list won't get ruined by enemies, because I'm expecting to face a lot of strong spellcasters this season. In my local meta there's already a lot of magic heavy armies. I'm used to playing Null Myriad because of that already as it is. Obviously it's like a cherry on the top in this season because everyone's going to be throwing around primal dice and trying to use the new spells. Like I said, that 46 mortal wound one, I know it's a casting value of 12, but those armies that are able to throw it out quite easily, and people that are willing to go sort of crazy with their primal dice, are going to be throwing that out, and being hit by 46 mortal wounds is not something that we want. There's a lot of buff spells in the game that people will always tell you that spells are, the strongest spells are buffing spells, which is mainly true. A lot of people cast spells onto their own units to make them stronger and then come and fight you, but I'm fine with that with this sort of list. I want the enemy to be able to do that, but like I said, the main drawback to this will being picked apart from range, so Null Myriad or of Sterility, hopefully countering some of that out there. But as always with all the lists, I like to play them through. I always say you have to play about 10 games with a list to truly see its potential. Obviously you can make changes as and whenever you want to, but yeah, I always say about 10 games will be able to give you enough variety and enough things that have happened between you making the list and playing it 10 times to be able to see sort of things consistently play out and if it's going to work for you or not. So this is the list that I'm going to be starting off with in this General's Handbook. I've recently assembled my second harvester. If you follow me on any of my social medias, Facebook or Instagram, I've assembled my second harvester and I've built all the Death Riders as well, because I only had the 5 prior to that, so I've brought another 5, which I was planning to use in the older lists, which I was proxying in, but now I've actually got proper Death Rider models. So I finally own this entire 2000 point army list at the same time, which is nice. It's built, it's all sprayed up, just needs painting, but we are going to be working on that. So if you're interested in seeing the physical army itself come to life, then all my social medias are in the description below. There's also a big OBR themed Discord, link to that again in the description. It's an awesome place filled with lots of people who love talking OBR, tactics, hobby, lore, everything. All OBR all the time, so if you guys are as crazy about the Ossiarch Bonereapers as I am, it's a great place to go. Link in the description below if you wish to join. But if not, let me know your feedback on this list. What are you guys going to be running into the General's Handbook, even if it's completely different to this one? I love seeing the armor lists and hearing all about them. Is this something that you would consider running, or any of the combos in this list that you like the look of? Let me know in the comments down below, and as always guys, stay safe, happy wargaming. Hey you! Did you know that Lakey Wargames now has an official eBay store? You can buy yourself all kinds of pre-painted and new on sprue hobby goodness and support the channel at the same time. There's a link in the description below if you want to check it out. I'd greatly appreciate it, and it's a fantastic way to support the channel. Okay, see you in the next one.